So my name is Ivy. I am the Vice President and Head of Education here at the CDG, and I'd love to welcome our panel if you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and your titles at EB.
Yes. Hi, I'm McKinley Sullivan. I am the COO of EBComs PR, and I am also a publicist. So it's lovely to be here with you guys today.
Hello, everyone. Is it on? Yes. My name is Rajinder. I'm one of the partners with McKinley at EBComs, and I'm the VP of Talent Relations and Awards, as well as a publicist.
And hi, I'm Katie. I am Director of Publicity and a publicist, or Director, Publicity. Where did we land? I just got a new title. Director of Publicity and publicist.
Amazing. So what is a publicist? Like, what do you guys do exactly?
Well, I'll start off with answering that. So the simplest way to define a publicist is someone who connects you with your public. So your publics could include your peer group in this industry, as well as the big one is connecting you with media. So that's like the primary function of a publicist, is to connect you to media and get your story out there, if you guys want to embellish a bit more.
Yeah, I think a good way to also talk about it is the way that like your agent has relationships with producers and studios and production companies. Your publicist has relationships with journalists, publications, and people who put on like events or awards shows like the Costume Designers Guild.
Do you guys handle individuals and organizations, or just individuals?
That's a great question, Ivy, as we were just discussing. So we actually do both. Our organization, EBComs PR, handles individual artisans such as yourselves, so costume designers, editors, directors, cinematographers, the gambit, but we also represent a few societies and organizations such as ICG, the International Cinematographers Guild, Local 600, and the Art Directors Guild, Local 800, and then a few other. We also represent whole films. That's important to note as well. So yeah, we kind of cover the gambit in that sense. So anything that's below the line and below the camera, we have our hands in.
So you guys are a little bit different than the PR studios that sometimes we deal with for shows of that nature. So tell us a little bit about that. So you guys have a couple of your clients or some of our members. Like, how does that work? Like, where do you begin? Like, if someone was interested in getting a PR agent, like, what's the beginning?
Well, I think the beginning is you need to have a body of work. If you think your work deserves the recognition and the publicity, you come to us. That's the beginning, right? And ideally, you should have, like, as a costume designer, you should make sure that you have your work on a TV show or on a feature, which is always better. Indie films, we can discuss this later. It's a bit trickier to publicize, but yeah. Anything you guys want to add?
But you guys do, so if an individual has like a brand, let's say they have like a clothing line or something like that, do you guys also offer that service as well for publicity, or is it just for the body of work for film and television and maybe theater?
I'll just go ahead and answer that to explain. So how we may differ from other PR firms in that sense is we work with our clients in one of two ways. So the one way is project-based, where you have a body of work that you want to promote, get the story out there, share your work, or do an awards campaign or something in that sense. And we call that a project-based, where you're just coming to us for that, and we're doing like kind of a one and done deal surrounding that project. But the second way we prefer to work with our clients is what we call our roster. So we're working with you year in and year out over a long-term basis, and where we're developing your overall presence within your community, whether that means you have a brand or you're just going from project to project, but we're just elevating the whole. So if you do have a brand, we would work that into a PR plan with you and would work with you on the roster basis, so we can help publicize not just your work, but your brands and all of that good stuff.
But I want to add something on that. I mean, not that we do that, but there are other PR companies out there that actually just focus on like fashion brands as well.
Sure.
That might not be our niche right now, but there are other, agencies that actually do that.
Well, we've been lucky that a lot of our members, thankfully for our marketing chair here, Samantha, who has helped us realize that you can use other venues to promote our work, such as like Trish Somerville with the Hunger Games. So I'm just curious if you guys help with that too, or is that something that is a different avenue on a different agency?
Yeah, it would, really our job is to take what a potential client brings us and do what we can with it. So it's kind of on a case by case basis, right? So certainly if somebody like had a brand or an element outside of their work but related to their costume design work that they wanted publicized, that would definitely be something we would consider. But like our agency in particular, we have we're sort of like no bullshit people. So if we don't think that we can do a good job on your behalf, we're not gonna take money and pretend that we can do a good job. We don't, like, that's just sort of not how we work. So on a case-by-case basis, that's definitely something we would consider doing. And there's one thing I do want to go to that was sort of in your question that I want to address, which is the difference between what we do and what a studio publicist does. If you have a TV show or a movie coming out. So we love studio publicists. We work with publicists from pretty much every studio, every production company that you can think of, and they are fantastic, fabulous people 99.9% of the time. But their job is to get the best stories in the media and to the public about the whole project.
Right.
So they are looking not just at the costume design, they are looking at the cinematography, the art direction, the actors, the VFX, yes, but they're looking at all the crafts. So when they're going to sort of variety about a project, they're not necessarily just highlighting costume design. Their job is to get as much coverage for all the crafts as possible. So they are pitching those journalists all of the crafts. If we are going on your behalf to Variety in the artisan section or to the Wrap or to any of these other publications, we are pitching just costume design and focusing on you and your career and the work that you did on this project. Whereas the studio publicists have a responsibility to represent the entire project. Additionally, if you are a roster client or even when you're a project client, we're thinking about your full career and the full story you want to tell. So for example, sometimes we have clients that are like, really interested in doing contemporary work, but they do a period piece. We may discuss with them, how much PR do we really want to do for this period piece, because we don't want you to be known as a period costume designer, because that's not what you want to do. So we may think strategically with that for you about how we want to promote something like that for your overall career, where a studio publicist, that is not what their focus is, not what their job is. They just want the most coverage possible for the project, so they're not going to think to themselves, this person doesn't want to be known as a period person, so I'm not going to pitch them. They're thinking, I want to get a piece in Costume Design Magazine for my project, so I am pitching. It's a different focus.
Oh, interesting. So in terms of campaigns, like we talked about, what is your first goal? Like, is it depending on when the movie's coming out or the TV's coming out, or
It also
episodic's
depends.
kind of hard because it's like it might be a whole year.
Yeah, I think we need to know first what the client's goals are, and then we work accordingly.
Yeah, so we would work with you to build a plan based on your goals. So I'll just use a case study here. Say you have a television show. We would say the lead time, if you have a television show coming out, is coming to us 4 to 6 months before that release date. However, if the studio is not coughing up a release date, we say get in contact us while you're in production so we can advise on connecting you with the unit publicist, getting all the assets you need. The most valuable assets you can have as a costume designer are I would say kind of your pre-production process in terms of like where your creativity is starting. So your sketches, your mock-ups, your kind of like your whole process, because that artwork oftentimes gets used in the magazines and publications and stories that we're placing on your behalf. So we definitely encourage the earlier the better when coming to us. It just gives us a longer lead time. So say so once you come to us, hopefully it's a little bit of headway, at least 4 to 6 months out. We evaluate your work and talk about your goals. So if your goal is then from a television show to be like, hey, I want to submit to the CDG Awards, I want to submit to Emmys, we start taking next steps in that process. So we'll do a release push, but we may hold some stories for different publications like Emmy Magazine closer to awards time, such as CDG Awards period or the Emmys, depending on where it's falling during the calendar year. So it's really dependent on, it's very individualized based on what you want to do with your work and what your goals are and what stories we can tell based on your work.
I know you guys said that you didn't do indie films, but that seems to be the new hot thing. Would
We
you guys?
we definitely do
Yeah.
do indie films. I think what she was trying to say is it can be a little bit harder with indie films to get those publications that are usually in people's goals. And I'm talking about like the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Vogue, all of that stuff. It's a harder pitch, but if you have a good story, absolutely. And so we'll always be honest and realistic about what we think we can do with your project.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
It also depends on a lot of different factors when it comes to a more indie film. So, for example, we find it's very hard to get crafts coverage out of the South by Southwest Film Festival. We sometimes have clients come to us, saying, I've got a film that's screening there, I'd love to represent you, and we say to them, we would love to do that, but we've been unsuccessful in the past, so again, we're not going to take your money just because we can. But but that's because it's generally pre-release. So if the film goes to South by Southwest, gets great reviews, gets picked up for distribution, we say, come back then, because that is a point where we can definitely make connections to journalists for you and be successful. Sometimes if a very small film is coming out in the heat of award season, that can be harder to get coverage too. But we still think that's a good time to bring in a publicist, because if you want to get sort of any coverage for a smaller project during the kind of big mega award season time, you want somebody that is going to be spending their whole day talking to journalists and finding the places and spaces where you can find other coverage.
I would also like to note, just because you brought up, just because it may be harder to get physical interviews for a film festival doesn't mean we can't help assist with finding panels and such for you to be on when you do attend those festivals.
Yes.
So it's just a different type, once again, a different type of public. So instead of sitting you down with the media, we want to sit you down in front of an audience to talk about your work.
Rachel, unfortunately, one of our panelists fell ill, but I have to say that she's really great about pushing our CDG members for panels that I do, and so I got to meet Rudy Mance, who was wonderful for our Suits panel. But I think it's really great that you guys not only worry about just the media and Instagram and stuff, but also whatever guild they're part of. And I'm sure you guys do it for other members, but I think it's really important to know that once you guys are on the team, it's all for all different kinds of things. It doesn't always have to be, like you said, like at South by Southwest or something.
Yeah,
so it's great.
I just want to add, that's how, EBComs and the other PR agencies, that we specialize in that. We are award strategists, and we're just not PR people. So we know where to put you so that your peers are watching you and they know who you are, especially someone, who's still up and coming, that's how we help them.
Well, I think you and I talked about that. We have judging film festivals, appearing at trade conferences.
Yes.
We have Comic-Con, things of that our nature. So it's good. And I think it's nice to know that you're not always after the big fish. That the people that are, like you said, up and coming, or have these great projects, that you guys would at least talk to them and say, hey, we don't think it's right now, but please come back, because it's really, some of our members don't have agents. They just seem to be going to the A24s and just continuing through that production company. So it's nice to hear that they don't always have to have everything lined up in order to get their stuff out there, because it's so competitive, as you guys know. It's just insane how much.
And on the note of agents, we also help people connect with agents. So that's another thing we do too.
We do
So
that.
if you ever need someone to facilitate and advocate, because it can be intimidating to go out and reach out to agents yourself, whether you're not happy with your current agency or don't have one. So we oftentimes do facilitate those introductions and advocate for
We
you
are
in that way.
agent matchmakers.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, I love it. That's so good to know. So you guys have a client. You're pitching, let's say, a film that's coming out in this a summer, smaller, maybe not a blockbuster. What do you guys do? Obviously 4 to 6 months out, but what in terms of your clients? Do they have to bring you, like, are they working on like their Instagram stories? Are they bringing them behind the scenes? And what is a typical day for someone who's trying to get their movie out for
So
the
the first thing we would have you do is collect all your assets. On our end, we would start talking to the studio and seeing what kind of support they're going to throw behind your project, because that's incredibly important, because that gives us how much bandwidth and also how much money we have to work with, because oftentimes the studios will have a set budget, and this is where you kind of can see if you've ever worked with a studio and you've never even heard from the publicist working on the film. It's probably because they have a limited budget and they're focusing on above the line, and that's where we kind of come in to also fill in the gaps, because then we become your advocates to the media to pitch that project. So a lot of it from your end is we need your time. That is the most important thing. If you don't have the time, it can be incredibly hard, because you do have to have these dedicated block out periods where you're able to sit through interviews. So assets, your times, and then sitting with us, and we're collecting, we usually do a Q&A with all of our clients, like in proper interview. One, so we can see where you're at with your interview level, how comfortable you are telling your own story. We also offer media training.
I love that. That's great. It's smart. Because
Yeah.
You don't want them to.
So we do like our first interview with you, and then from there we kind of create like a mini PR plan of like, okay, we think based on your story and based on your background work and what you're trying to convey here, that your story may be good, and we're going to go start pitching with X, Y, and Z outlet to place the story here. So we usually start with a set target list, and then we kind of branch out from there and kind of align based on your project. It would be a lot easier if you start throwing like titles. Oh, maybe like,
okay,
I can speak on a client.
Okay, go ahead.
So we worked with on Michelle Matlin's Succession campaign recently, and she got her first Emmy nomination for the last season, which we were a part of. I actually don't think she's
not one
she's
of
not
ours.
a local member, so
No,
that's
she's not.
okay.
She's 829, but
yes,
she's a sister
she's
local.
New York. But so for her, she had never been nominated for the first 4 seasons, even though you could arguably say that quiet luxury stealth wealth like kind of stemmed from Succession making it. So we really tried to capitalize on that. And at the time, HBO, because it's a contemporary costume design show, wasn't really focusing on the fashion of it all, but we saw how much of an influence it was having on the general public and how that translated into like the industry and like the styles people were going for the brands. So we really worked with her and talked about like what she was doing to get there, and her process was really fun because she said she would actually kind of stake out where rich people would be and just kind of people watch them, and just like took that kind of approach, which was kind of fun. So we then, because she sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here. The first 4 seasons she didn't do a lot of press, so for that final season we were able to really do a big push and talk about her work and all of the stuff that went into that, and we did a push for CDG awards, we did a push for Emmys, for which she was nominated. Unfortunately we didn't get a win there. Shout out to Wednesday, fabulous work on that show.
But I think the whole pop culture of that fashion.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I saw her panel when she came for the HBO thing. It was great.
Yes.
It is a thing, you know.
Oh yeah.
It is.
But when did she come to you? Like, had she been with you guys before for the whole like?
No,
the whole
so
run?
she
Final
actually
season.
came to us because of the lack of coverage from the first 4 seasons. So we just helped amplify that voice and really got her story out there and told. So shout out to Michelle and her husband David. They're lovely. They're a great team.
Yeah, and I wanna touch on that, the idea of time, right? A successful campaign requires time from a publicist, time from the artist, and again, I feel like I'm like harping on the studios, but like we love them, but time is sometimes something they don't have, especially nowadays. There are less publicists at the studios. Everyone's time is more pressed than it ever has been. And so one thing that we find is that if a studio publicist knows that you have a personal publicist helping you out, they know that they have more human time to dedicate to your work. So they may be like, you know, more, they may throw out more pitches as well for you, knowing that if a journalist says yes, all they have to do is kick it to us, and we're spending all the time. They don't have to spend that time. That is a limited resource for them too. So I think that like that's one of the reasons why we get along so well with studio publicists, is in some ways what we represent to them is more time that they're not paying for, right?
Yeah.
You know,
It's like we become the assistants, right?
or like almost like a member of, an
Yeah,
external
yeah,
member of
yeah.
their team. Yeah.
An extra help for them.
Right.
Yeah, in a way, it's like somebody, like most studios will hire an external PR agency that specialize in certain things, like during award season, for example. So we essentially become an external agency for them, and it increases their capacity to do more. So everyone's doing more, and so then we're able to get success like Michelle did, which obviously, you know, was a collaboration. It was us being able, this is my other thing, again, I'm a little all over the place, but like, as a publicist, something we are is storytellers, and that's one of the reasons why we do that initial Q&A also about a project, is because we know what stories the journalists are looking for, because we talk to them all the time and are hearing what they're interested in and what they're prioritizing. We hear what you're doing on your project, and we craft it into a story designed for the audience of the journalists, or the people that are putting on the panels, or the people that, you know, programming panels and festivals, and we tell them your story so that then they can write the story that they want to tell to their audience, which could be an audience of your peers or an audience of you know, people that read their film publication or what have you.
I just want to add one quick note, because it kind of circles back to a question you asked earlier about brands. So oftentimes you'll like have worked with a brand when you're in a production on something, and sometimes we do reach out to that brand and collaborate with their internal PR teams to help amplify that as well. So speaking of brands, that's something
Well, we've had quite a few members successfully do
brand collaborations,
or like JCPenney's, Samantha got
exactly.
Oh my God, what was it?
Johnny Woodjet.
Johnny would get an entire prom collection at JCPenney. So our members, the ability to not just design, but also to broaden their the public awareness of our members is so important. And so that's why I'm always fascinated to see like where like agencies or PR people, how much we can go, how far we can go. Can they go, you know, much further than we used to think, where it's like, oh, that was a really cute show, thank you so much. Now it's like they have a line, and then they've got a shoe line, and they're able to do Instagram, and they're doing takeovers, and they're judging Project One or some other show. You know what I mean? It's very important that we.
It's actually one of my favorite things about working with costume designers, and I would say hair and makeup, is you guys have so much opportunity for crossover into, like, I'm just gonna call it the mainstream, as opposed to more technical crafts that are kind of become industry insular in terms of the news. But what you guys do connects so much with the public and like comes off the screen and into everybody's everyday life. So it does, like, you guys are like a gold mine in the sense of like there's so many opportunities and creative ideas we can come up with to get your work out there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our members have sometimes more following than other people because they want to know who's wearing what or what brand that was,
and
or like how they made that.
No, the thing is, costume designers are the trendsetters, literally.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, people dress according to the hit TV show, or what was, you know,
inspired by Bridgerton, for example.
Exactly.
Certainly I
an
do.
entire wedding line.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Like our members have become bigger in an amazing way, broader than just the show that they're on.
And another thing is that when if you're in a moment where you're dealing with, you know, maybe a lot is coming your way and that's really exciting, but you also have, you know, a television show to work on, a film to work on, that is, I think, another thing that we sometimes end up doing for our clients is kind of being like, I don't want to say personal assistants because we're not quite picking up dry cleaning, but like, you know, making schedules, you know, we you know, if a studio is asking you for a bunch of different interviews and times, we just ask you one time, like, what day can you do interviews, and then we coordinate all of them during a block, like with a studio or with all the journalists, so that you don't have like 50 different email chains going back and forth with a bunch of different things. So it can be really helpful when you are trying to make the most of your time when you're working on one project and promoting another, to kind of have somebody there who's just like coordinating.
Right. And reminding you that don't forget, tomorrow, your interview.
Yeah,
Are you ready?
Yeah. So sometimes our job is like high level strategy, talking with you guys about like where you want to be in 5 years and like what your big goal is and how we can get you there. And sometimes it's like with like a journalist, like what about 2 p.m.? Okay, what about 2:15? You know, so it's all of that. Yeah.
I would also say, depending on the size of your production, a lot of you do have teams behind you. So there is at times when you're strapped for time that we do work with like your costume assistants and stuff like that, just to get like assets and things that we need.
Assistant
Assistant
we are
costume
not,
designers,
they are
sorry.
not assistants to the
Yes.
costume designers. They are assistant costume designers.
I do
Jane.
apologize.
That's okay. I just want to clarify that
Yeah.
they are not assistants. They are just the assistant costume designers. So. Oh, go ahead.
No, and I mean that's the other thing is that we've also worked with some of our clients who are trying to work with their assistant costume designers or assistant editors and sort of help them raise up and get more focus and attention on their work too. So that's also something we can do if you're in a position where you're like, it is really important to me to be a mentor and sort of to raise up my team along with me. We've done that as well. So there's a lot we can do.
There's 3 categories here. Obviously,
Right.
we have costume designers, assistant costume designers, and illustrators. And some of our illustrators are sometimes very famous. We
Yeah.
have some incredible talent.
It's often their
within-
artwork.
Yes, that's become.
Yeah.
And do you guys represent illustrators if they ever had like something like a book coming out or something interesting that would help pitch them? Because they, like I said, they do a lot of cons, they do a lot of speeches, they do a lot of teaching. Some of them are very, very successful.
I don't think we've ever worked with an illustrator that wasn't already like kind of in a group package deal, but it would totally be something that we're open to and taking on because we have a few clients that have had books out and we've worked with the publishing PR teams and gotten awareness about the book out. So it's totally something within
And
our
she
realm.
is a passionate writer herself,
Yes.
Katie, and Meredith is a writer and reader. So yeah, very passionate about books.
I would say that to go back down to sort of like sort of the key element is that when the people who are whether they're journalists or people who are putting on panels, when people are putting together the kind of things that would get you to the various publics that we discussed, they generally need what we call in journalism a peg, and it's essentially like why now, because so many people are coming to them with like an exciting book or high quality work. So a peg would be a new TV show coming out. A peg would be the final season of a TV show or the finale episode, something like that, something that makes it, quote, newsworthy. And so a book coming out would be a peg. So if an illustrator came to us and is just like, I want more attention in the media, I think I have all this, all of my peers say that, I can get more. The first thing we'd ask is like, what's coming up for you next? What is that peg? So that we can go to journalists and say, something is happening in November. So we want you to cover this in November so that they have a reason to cover it in November. So pretty much if something has a peg, a publicist, whether it's us or somebody else, a publicist can do work on behalf of that thing.
Yes.
So I guess the real question is, what is something that go for? Like in terms of, is it all price points like based on what it is? Because that's really the question. It's like, can people afford to do this? Because this, like for us, you asked me, if the studio's not behind you, there is a guild price members that can pay for the FYC electronically, and they can send a newsletter out and they can send a blast. But it's very expensive to market yourself. I mean, and time, right? It's always about time. I'm just curious, like you don't have to do an exact number, but I'm just wondering because we know what agents take. So.
Okay, yeah. So the financials of it all, and we can't speak on behalf of other individual personal publicists. We do personally, though, as EBComs PR, pride ourselves on making your budget work for us in that collaboration. So we do have a standard rate sheet that kind of varies. Like if you're on our roster, you pay a low monthly retainer, and then it kind of goes up a little bit when you have a project. If you're just coming up to us on a project basis, it is a little bit more expensive just because it is more of a ramp up, right? Like we're getting familiar with you guys off the bat. However, and I know I'm being recorded right now, I will say for costume designers, because we know you're a department that does not get paid as equally as some of the other department heads, that we do often negotiate with you guys and work with the rates that you're provided. And it's also helpful for us to know, like, we do have that do our due diligence and have the conversation with the studio to figure out what their funding is, so we can work that into your PR plan, and kind of say what's within the realm of scope, also within your budget.
Yeah, here's a good example. This is actually with a cinematographer I was working with. We were working with him. I believe it started as a project basis and then moved to a roster client, which is often what we like to do. We like to start with a project and make sure we're a really good fit as publicist and client, and then if you want to keep going after the project, transition to roster. We do that quite a bit, but our original plan with this client was to do a PR push for the release of the film and then an awards push. But what happened is the studio, after the release, decided to stop really supporting for awards for this person. And they were willing to do some man hours, but they were not going to be supporting it financially. And for an awards run without a financial push, it's a harder road without a financial push, depending on what your goal is for your awards. It depends. But so we were able to go to him and say, we spoke with the studio. This is where they're at in terms of the money for awards push. This is what your campaign would look like. Do you want to continue working with us for this campaign? Do you want to pay us? Because it's going to be a harder road than we thought it was going to be. So that's an and we ended up he ended up wanting to do the push. We did the push. We did some really fun things, and it was great. But that's an example of a way that we really want to be very transparent with you guys financially. Transparent with our clients financially, because if we find out something's going to be a harder road and the goals that we originally set may be harder to achieve, we will come and we will tell you and we will talk about it and discuss whether or not you want to continue to invest financially in us on a harder road, and explain to you, the benefits of why you might want to and the reasons why you might not, because we want to make sure that next time you have another project or the opportunity comes and the road's going to be a little easier, that you feel like you can really trust us to be thinking about your financials and thinking about what may be the most comfortable for you, so that the next project you come back and we work together again, and maybe that's the one that gets the award nomination, gets the Oscar nom, gets the attention. So that's one way.
The reason I was able to meet you was because of Deborah Scott's career achievement with Avatar. So would you say something like that, that she's going to be doing 3 of those films, that you would be like, hey, we'd like to take you on and then focus on those release dates like that? Yes. Or someone who's like, I'm only doing 1 movie a year, this is what I would do, maybe we'll just do a project based. Because that's the interesting thing, is some people do television, so every year that it's going to be not the final season, but it's very fashionable or what have you.
It really depends on your goals, and we can use Deborah as an interesting case study. I hope she doesn't mind. So she had gone on to Avatar and then was kind of in a 10-year holding period with those films, right? So for her, a lot with her career achievement and coming back out was kind of her reintroduction to you guys as a community, because she had been behind closed doors a little bit working on that project for so long and not having as many new projects come out. So that was kind of the idea with her was initially, but we did have a plan in mind, because there was such a big gap from the first movie to the second movie. We do have kind of a strategy in mind for the Way of Water that came out, for what's going to come with Avatar 3. But in the meantime, because there is a gap in between, we're focusing on getting her more involved with the community, as well as educational outreach, speaking at universities and schools. And that is because the Avatar movies in themselves were such a feat in terms of the technological advancements that are happening within the costume community, with the creating of the costumes physically and then getting them digitally scanned and all of that beautiful work that's being done behind the scenes. So so for her, it's during the lulls, we're focusing on a lot of educational outreach. And
how does that help, other than obviously more practice of speaking in front of students and public, but how I'm always asking people panelists, but they sometimes no, I don't need to do that. And it's well, maybe you do, because it's helping the community, but for education stuff, I'm just fascinated why you guys pitch schools, even though I fully support the education of our community.
first things first, it's just as inspiration,
Mhm.
right? Like just taking a look at Deborah's career and what she's done, it's like she's a legend.
No, 100%. That's
You
why
know
we
what I mean?
awarded her
Like,
the
So
the
just
award last year.
having someone like her, that's point number one. It's
Yep.
inspiration.
I would say too, it just like it's really project dependent why we reach out to schools, because like in this case there is a lot of new technology involved, so that's like educating the people coming up in the industry of like what the possibilities are and kind of like training them in a way and to be prepared what they're stepping into. So that's why we do it, but also because it's those are okay. So if you're ever interested. Okay, how do I want to say this? So if you're going into a career in costume design and you're and I don't think anyone actually goes into being like, I'm going to win the Oscar one day or I'm going to win the Emmy.
Yeah.
But if that is something that you would like to see for yourself, I do think there's something to be said about speaking to people of all stages of the career, because those often do end up becoming the voters, right?
Yeah.
So if they feel like they have a connection with you, they're going to support your career alongside their career. So there is something to be said for that.
Yeah.
For sure.
There are strategic reasons to do it, and then and it is our job sometimes to help facilitate those strategic reasons or identify them. But there's also emotional reasons. McKinley has talked a lot about goals, us learning your goals and helping you reach your goals. And I think that all of us, coming up in our careers have had mentors that have helped us to reach our goals. And so sometimes with like educational opportunities, it's about sort of giving back and becoming that mentor,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
right?
Just doing that.
And so our job our job encompasses a lot, and it is to identify those strategic goals and sort of sometimes, if you're like, I don't know, is this too calculated, to kind of nudge you to be a little bit more calculated. But sometimes our job is just to, recognize what your emotional goals are and to help you to reach them. So, we've had clients go speak at film students at universities, and we work to coordinate things with just like the students that run the film department somewhere who are bringing in speakers, because those clients want to be the mentors that once inspired them and once brought them up. So it's all that we can sort of be there to help reach all those different goals.
And you just never know whose life you're about to change, right? Like that could be one student who will always remember you for that one thing that you said that you don't even know what you said, but that would have changed that person's life. So I don't know. I think
Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I mean, we
Yeah.
have a mentorship program here, but I think it's always great to go and be part of the community and educate the directors and producers and explain to them what costume designers are, because that's very important, because some of them still don't know.
Education.
Education.
Lots of education.
Your master class program
Yeah.
is amazing here.
thank
I
you.
greatly support
And
it.
our founder Meredith couldn't be here with us
I
today, but one thing that Meredith is really passionate about, and I'm speaking for her a little bit, is like Meredith founded the agency for Behind the Camera People because she was like passionate about the art that was taking place back there, passionate about it. And so that ethos is part of our agency. It trickles down all the way through. There are a lot of publicists, whether they're studio publicists or other individual publicists, who come from a similar ethos. So sometimes those opportunities are just about like, we love the art you're doing and we want more people to see and recognize the work that you're creating, whether that is a student who's going to be inspired by it, a peer who maybe is going to be somebody that you end up hiring to be an assistant or on your team, or and then sometimes it's journalists and it's the game and it's the politics of it, but that passion for the art is also there too, and we can have all of it at the same time.
And this kind of business model never really existed like 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and it's just growing and growing. We get people asking us that within and outside of the industry that they are publicists for below the line. Like really?
It's phrase though is just so terrible. Like
I
there is an
know.
actual
I know,
line,
right?
Which I think is why I appreciate the fact that you guys do that for the students and also the communities and other even the film festivals where the designer is up there with the cinematographer and
Absolutely.
the art director. I'm like, we also helped contribute to this
Yeah,
project.
I think collaboration with your fellow department heads is so incredibly important as well, and getting those conjoined stories of how you work together out there is super important.
And do you guys do that? Do you pitch sometimes, like the whole team? Because I saw that for the HBO. It was like the editor, the set decorator. They had the art director.
It kind of
costume
it
designer.
depends on the project, but sometimes we represent multiple people on a project, and it just kind of syncs up nicely. Other times it's us working with, if they have a personal publicist, their personal publicist, and collaborating in that way. Or sometimes it's just the studio and us pushing everyone together and saying like, well, if you can't do something for the individual, can we make it an all crafts thing so everybody can be included in being that advocate?
It did happen with Elvis. Warner Brothers actually, because it was just getting too overwhelmed with everything, and they actually hired us to run the entire Australian campaign because most of them were.
Well, Catherine is a double threat.
Yes.
So that must have been. Oh, we'll have both of them out there. No problem. It's the same person because she's amazing.
We worked with Mandy Walker on that campaign.
Yeah,
So,
she's amazing.
So that's a great example that what we did, and it was successful, I think.
So do you guys suggest for those of us in the audience to go after the studio PR right when we get started so we know kind of like what the game plan is? Because I know sometimes they don't know if it's going to be a hit. They hope it is. So
typically the studio PR team though isn't assigned until later on. So your first point of contact is going to be your unit publicist, because at some point in their internal timeline they do a handover from the unit publicist to the PR team that then's facilitating, and that's where it can get a bit tricky because you can develop a really close relationship with your unit publicist, but once it's handed over to like the release team, they may not have that personal connection with you, so it's also about making sure that gets developed as well. And I would always say, even if you don't like hire a personal PR firm, if you have a project and you haven't heard from the publicity team, please reach out to them. Please try and get a hold of them, because you should establish that connection.
And I'm going to add another thing. Whether you hire a publicist or you do not, always collect assets while you work. While you're conceptualizing it, just collect.
Well, I mean, some of us know, but what do you consider an asset? Like, what would be a great thing to be like, hey, we're starting to bank the behind the scenes. Like, what do you guys suggest is a good asset bank?
Physical sketches for you guys. If you do physical sketches, if you do virtual like iPad sketches, saving those as well, and just organizing them, saving them and organizing them. Take pictures, not just for reference, right? You guys take reference pictures. I'm assuming many of you take reference pictures. Take pictures that aren't just for your reference, but that you think are going, that would be in a publication, that look like something you've seen in the magazine.
Like
grab
what? I'm just
like
trying to
shopping
get
for fabrics, like when you're in the fabric store.
Pictures of yourself. Pictures of yourself.
Pictures of yourself. Pictures of your
marketing
team.
stuff.
Even if it's like a pretend,
pretending to adjust a shoulder of a shirt.
Yeah, like you are like trying to sew something.
No, we don't stage those photos. What are you talking about? Never, right? We never do those.
Like stage it as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of people I think have the fear of like, oh, we're not supposed to take like behind the scenes photos. Like it's only for the unit photographer. We're not allowed to do that. It's
no.
Take them,
but work with the studio publicist about posting them,
and if
right?
you're working with a personal publicist, we will never release anything to the media that is not approved.
There's a couple more things I want to just like practical advice. Take pictures with the main actors, but also take pictures with extras people who do not have their own publicists and stuff like that. The reason being, sometimes it's very hard for us to get a studio or a particular actor to say yes to posting a photo. It's an additional level of like clearance when you're getting when you're using an asset, when you're putting it out to a publication especially, but also on your own personal social media. Generally speaking, we want to get approval from the studio publicists. Generally speaking, if there is an actor in the photo, they contractually have to get permission from that actor. And sometimes that takes time, and also sometimes the actor says no because they don't like the way they look that day. They're like, I look a little puffy, and I'm gonna say no. So that's and it's unfortunately true that the sort of an extra in costume doesn't have the same obligation. The studio doesn't have the same obligation. So those are very easy to get, much more easy to get approved. So I would say get a mix with the actors, and then also without actors or without the named actors present. I would also get, so this is the other thing, is that studio publicists just like to be in control of the narrative. They don't want to see something go out before they plan to get it out. They don't want to be scrambling. They don't want their VP of marketing, their boss, to be like, why did the costume designer put a photo of this costume on their Instagram? I thought we were going to put this out 2 weeks from now, So one way that you can get the studio publicists to like you and therefore do more on your behalf is to say, I want to put some photos on my Instagram on the day of the premiere. Do you mind if I do that? Here are the photos. Can I clear them with you? This is if you don't have a personal publicist. We'll do that on your behalf, and we can, try to get a little bit more. But if you basically show the publicist that you're going to play ball and you respect them and understand what their job is, they probably will do more for you.
That sounds. And how do you feel about re-gramming or retweeting photos from actors that are you might be?
That's fine. That's fair. That's fine. That's great. If you're not the one putting it out, you can repost.
You're not in trouble,
it.
right?
Yeah, you're not in trouble.
Because sometimes people are like, "Oh, should I regram?" They're like, "Well, they put it out there, so I guess you're okay."
Yeah, I think that's totally
the
fine.
other asset that you can also save is your lookbook.
Mood boards.
Yeah, mood boards.
Yeah,
lookbook,
mood boards are amazing.
Take pictures of everything.
Everything.
Yeah, the worst happens, you don't use it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, we can't get it approved.
The other thing is
A list
if
of your
you-
brands or manufacturers, whoever you're working with, that's helpful too.
We're able to do lots of pushing it into every back door that we can kind of stuff. So for example, if you're on a project and you have a really great relationship with a unit publicist, and the studio isn't giving us enough behind the scenes photos of you, but the unit publicist took them. It's just what the studio does is the unit publicist sends them hundreds and hundreds of photos. They laboriously go through all of the photos. The unit photographer, sends them all of those photos. They laboriously go through, time consuming, looking at them all, picking some and deciding what to use. Then you're saying, hey, we want more of the behind the scenes of the costume design. They may be like, I'm not going to do all that. I'm not going to go back through those thousands of photos. And they're like, this is what we have, and that's it. If you have a good relationship with the unit photographer, you can say, hey, send me over all of the photos you took. We can go through them, and then we go to the studio publicist and are like, oh, our client sent us over these photos. Can we get approved for just to use these? And then we can end up using them. They weren't going to go back into all of those folders of thousands of photos, but we can do it, and then we get them approved.
So be besties with the still photographers.
Yes,
Be besties.
You want to be besties with the
and with the
If you
editor, right?
are, Also, sometimes if you're really close with an actor on the show, we've had this happen. Sometimes we're like, okay, listen, you text the actor's assistant that can I use this photo? And then you get all of that information, and then we go to the studio publicist and we're like, oh, our client is so close with this actor, and the actor said they can use it, and here's the assistant, here's an email from the assistant saying we can use it. So can we post it on the Instagram? The studio's covered, they have it in writing, it's fine to go. So we can work with you on all those little avenues and all those little extra things to help you get the kind of assets that you need for your own social media pages, for your websites, and for sometimes for publications as well.
And then I have a question, because we do lots of marketing and lots of education. Do you suggest, in terms of your Instagram, to have it just be solely about your design? Because some people have a mixed feeling about lifestyle, family design.
It depends. So every client that we bring on, we kind of do a little bit of a social media audit, and I know I'm going to say it again, but it all comes down to your goals, because depending on what you're trying to convey, we may say, okay, during this campaign, tone it down on the personal posting, and let's focus clearly just on your work. So I think it really is a case-by-case basis, and it also depends on, in the social media front, how curated you're trying to be as an artist, right? So I think it's really a case-by-case basis. We do tend to do an audit. I also think it's a point to note that our agency in particular, we're not social media managers. We don't have social media managers on our team, but we do have referrals of people we work with, but we often advise on social media and kind of oversee posting and help with hashtags or like who needs to be included in photos and stuff.
We can
but-
guide you, but
Yeah.
not like manage.
We can discuss social media as part of an overall
I was gonna
content
say.
strategy, but we're not specialists in developing social media content. If somebody's trying to build a brand, a lot of brand marketing nowadays, and I mean like a clothing brand or a clothing line, a lot of brand marketing is very personal. It's somebody speaking to screen, especially for as long as we have TikTok. So there's sometimes it's very case by case depending on your goals.
So obviously you guys aren't social, but if you think social media is very important, like it's
Yeah.
part
Of
of, you
course.
have no
It's
choice.
so
Yeah.
important.
You gotta do it,
You
right?
got,
It's
you
so
don't have to
important.
do it. We actually, I'm gonna bring it back to Michelle Matlin. She has no social media.
Oh.
So it's you don't have to do it. There is ways around it, but then you are like strategically having to go through other avenues to get your work out there. You all work in a visual medium, so it is important to have a portfolio. So even if you don't have social media, I strongly recommend having a website of some sort or some platform where people can go and view your work in some way.
Yeah.
Because some people, their personal ethos may not be like, they don't align with social media. They don't want to be on the platforms, which I totally respect and understand. So we can just find creative ways to kind of go around that to get your work seen and shown. But is it an easy way? I actually was just talking to an agent the other day that said, oh no, we know, like, that's actually how I sign clients. I go through Instagram and kind of look at their work. And we've heard producers kind of do the same thing a little bit. So it is beneficial in that sense, that it's just a portfolio that lives online, like a website that people can go and kind of find
It's
you.
the quickest way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
No, I agree, but
yeah.
sometimes people, it's a lot of work, right?
It
is a
lot of
people
work,
use their
yeah.
teams
Well,
or their assistant costume designers or PAs to help them
Mhm.
get
Yeah,
the content,
it
sometimes
is.
do like little teasers of behind the scenes. I was just curious what you guys.
Yeah.
your opinion was on it.
I think that authenticity is the key word
Yes.
for a lot of things, but especially for social media. If you're not a talk to camera person, but you want to have an Instagram that you just post once a week, a carousel of, like your TV show is airing once a week, and as the episode's airing, you're posting, your work from that particular
Yeah.
episode. That's just stills that the studio has released. That can be something that's relatively low impact, but is then a research tool. When people are looking you up and researching you, they find it easily and can see that. Or if you are somebody that like really loves talking to camera and wants to be more present and be out there, you have the tools at your fingertips to do it. So it can be time consuming, but there are ways that you can take advantage of social media as a toolkit and have it be less time consuming and not, sort of being inauthentic.
And there's one more note, because the original question was about like assets. If you can, and there's certain costumes from set that you love, try and figure out where they're going after. Try and keep track of that, because as you've probably seen being events here at the CDG, we love a good display. We love a good visual display of your costumes, whether it be at a panel.
To have them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So if
I
you
love it.
can, especially if there's a few key costumes or pieces that like meant a lot to you, or there's like a specific story behind that a reason why a character wore this, why you chose that, if you can like figure out and keep track of it, whether it goes into studio storage or wherever it may go, I think that's incredibly beneficial, because people love visual displays of your work and seeing them.
But also for award season, if they're going
Yes.
to
Oh,
fit
yeah.
them or they're
Yeah.
going to,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And do
Well,
you guys
RIP
also-
fit them, but
Yeah. Well, but ASU
Yeah.
is now doing
Yeah.
I know
they're
I'm an
trying,
ASU
they're trying.
alumni, so
Yeah, they're
We'll
definitely
advocate.
trying. But we have tried to pitch with our own, like I said, with marketing, with Samantha and stuff, to make sure that our members put in their deal memos that they get credited for being at the movie theaters in the display cases. Because
Yeah.
it's like, worn by such and such actor. I'm like, that's fantastic, but we did that. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Right,
our work.
right.
Please
Yeah.
credit us. Do you guys help with that too when things are going, like the arc light or
We
going
can.
on
if
location?
we absolutely if we
we
get
know
wind
what's
of it,
happening too, we
Yeah.
can start talking to the studio publicist and be like, and sometimes there's, and again, social media is a great thing for this. There's all different avenues for it.
I know we shame them. I
Yeah.
mean, we
Yeah.
have campaigns that say
Yeah.
credit the costume designer, and it has worked. Like,
Yeah.
we're so sorry next time, we promise. And
No,
then
I
next
think
time,
yeah.
they fail.
sometimes you just like we are saying that studio publicists is too much for them, you know, they have tons.
No, for sure, but that's what you're saying, be friends with them to
You
help
just have
them.
to,
Yes, yes,
remind them.
Yeah.
you
But
know,
if it
and-
comes across our desk, yeah, we're advocating for you. We're giving you that
Yeah,
credit.
and if you walk into somewhere and see your costume displayed and you're not credited, there's
Yeah.
still things we can do. We can be like, you know, we can talk to the studio and be like, hey, can you put something on your studio social media that like is a picture of this on display at the ArcLight and says, you know, congrats to our costume designer on, you know, so
There's something you can.
yeah, it's
There is
never
something.
fait accompli, you know.
Or I would go
even
to
if it's already there.
ArcLight and say we gotta put the credit there.
Yeah.
I would just
Oh,
walk up
yeah.
and be
Any
like,
Put a
conversation,
post-it.
yeah.
We'll put a post-it on there for you.
Oh, we have printed things out and slapped it on for
Oh,
Comic-Con
yeah,
all
yeah,
the time.
yeah.
I'm not gonna say what show it was, major show, but we had one of our members go and just do a little pronounce costume design by Bella, and then they
But
just
that
slapped it on there and just
yeah.
walked away.
No, but that's interesting because I've seen those costumes in, you know, and I don't see the name of the costume designer.
They sure don't, but
Yeah.
you know what actor wore it, and so we're
Yeah.
just trying to continue to educate that the designers are just as important as the person that's
Yeah.
wearing
Yeah.
it. It took a lot of people, not just the designer, but a whole manufacturing
Right.
team to get that super
And
suit
sometimes
together,
it
right?
just takes us to like remind the studio publicists that are
Or-
focused on above the line that like, hey, if you're doing a costume display at Comic-Con, it can help your costume design award campaign to put the costume designer's name on
Right,
there.
right, very
And then
smart.
they say, oh yeah, that's right, because they want more awards for their projects because that does help them. So even somebody that is like thinking, I'm putting the actor's name on there because that helps journalists,
public, right?
the public
Help
and the
the
journalists
public
and
there.
whatever.
Yeah.
We just say, oh, we have found as specialists with, you know, below, behind the camera, as specialists, we have found that we get, it is a, you know, a way to build award buzz to have the costume designer's name on. They will be like, oh, great idea. And or sometimes they
Right.
say, we don't care. Screw
Sure,
you.
I mean, that happens,
But,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
always nice
but-
to ask, because if you continue to ask, they eventually get either worn
Yeah,
down or
yeah,
like, oh, that's
yeah.
so smart.
Yeah.
Let's get that Emmy or Oscar or CDGA, because they're just as great, or
And then,
Adrian's
and then
awesome.
you know, if the studio publicist suggests it to their boss, and then they get a costume designer award nomination, then that studio publicist gets to say, look what I did, and you know,
Right.
maybe it came from us, but we don't care. They can get the credit with their boss.
Right. So smart. So I guess we can open it up to questions, if anyone has any questions. Anyone? No, did we answer everything from your guys' minds?
Well,
That's
I would say
amazing.
On what you just said, it kind of normalizes it. Even
Yes.
if you start getting no's, like over time, you're gonna get yes. You
Yeah.
normalize the fact that
Yeah.
that this is to everybody's advantage to like raise the level of exposure.
Awareness.
Yeah. And I think that's what Ranjinder was saying earlier, where it's often not the studio publicists actually resisting it. It's often that it is 8 p.m. and they are tired and they are
There's only so
finalizing
much they
something
can
so they
do.
can eat, you know? And so if you're just that voice that's agitating for it, then they're not necessarily resisting it because they don't want to. They're just not thinking of it. And so you're that external brain thinking of it for them.
Awesome. So no questions, really? Oh,
Just a question.
Yeah.
As a client, I'm just, the relationship between yourselves, is it a one-on-one relationship or is it a
That's a
team
great
behind the
question.
scenes that you guys are working on my behalf as a team? or-
Yes, so it's a little bit of both. So usually what happens when you get onboarded, we do place you with a day-to-day coordinator that you're going to be working hands-on with that does the coordination. But oftentimes, us three here, or at least one of us, like myself or Rajinder, would always be in the loop and on copy and doing your overall strategy because we're such a tight-knit team. So EBComs has about like 10 to 15 team members at any given moment. And we do work very collaboratively in that sense, and we're a very tight-knit team. We kind of all help each other with all of our campaigns. So you may have a day-to-day coordinator, but you would have a team behind the scenes also overseeing the strategy.
Yeah, so sometimes I'm assigned as a point person to a
Yeah.
client, and then we also have sort of a media database person that helps us develop lists and is like constantly tracking the changes when journalists move from publication to publication, what freelancers are working from where, that helps us out. And then if I'm, you know, someone's point person and I'm like, you know, I'm not exactly sure what to do here, I am able to go to McKinley and Ranjinder and talk strategy with them. So and our founder Meredith sort of, she doesn't know every detail, but I would say that she pretty much knows what's going on with pretty much all of our clients, pretty much at all times, which is because she's Superwoman, and I don't know how she does it, so, you know, if she has a thought for your client, she will contribute to strategy all the time, and so even if you're only sometimes speaking to one person on a day-to-day basis or on a week-to-week basis, the full strategy of the team is on your behalf.
Also, like, it is a little bit of a matchmaking process too, right? So if you say you met one of us at an event and you felt like you had a kismet connection with us, like, you can definitely request one of us personally to be on your account, because that's who you want to work with, because that's who you have a connection with. But I'm also a big advocate, just like when you're speaking to different agents, speak to different PRs, speak to different personal publicists, just because we are such big advocates of, like, you got to have that collaborative connection, and you have to be in the same strategic mindset with who you're working with. So if it's your first time doing PR, we always encourage that you interview a few PR firms and a few publicists to make sure you're comfortable with who you're working with, because once again, you're spending a lot of time in communication together, so it's important to make sure you're in the same flow. And money. Money is involved. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't.
Lincoln, then go ahead.
What?
Go ahead, Lincoln, and we'll go with
Well, you mentioned the money, and you explained it all, but can you at least tell us the range of pricing?
I'm like, I'm on camera. Right? I'm kind of on camera.
We can have a chat. Maybe.
Yeah, let's sidebar. Let's sidebar, because I'm happy to have individual conversations.
I think
case by case basis.
But it is case by case.
It's case by case. It can change year to year and stuff. So putting it on camera here, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to. Like I said, I don't want to put on the spot. I was just curious what you guys.
Yeah, but we do have a rate sheet. We're happy to send it around. We can give you all our emails and stuff, and happy. But also we can sidebar at the end of this.
Mine too kind of had to do with the rate, but
yes.
You guys say earlier you said when you get in contact with you guys, 4 to 6 months before your shows come out. How does that work with the rate and the time frame? Like, what's the time frame?
So you guys
work with your client?
Yes. Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun there. I got really eager, so I apologize. So we actually have set rates in that sense for in the sense of a project push for a feature film there's a set price, but we may space it out over a couple of months, so it's not hitting your bank account all at once. But
prorate it.
Yeah, we prorate it, but they're typically set prices for the full campaign. Oftentimes though, we do modify campaigns. We do occasionally have people come to us a month before the release, and there's a little bit of a different strategy there. So we do kind of modify based on your needs, but for the most part, it's pretty much a set rate that we spread it out over a couple of months, depending on what time frame you come to us. Yes.
I just wanted to also ask about a retainer. If I was on a show and it's almost been 2 years ago, and I was working with you, and we built a relationship, and things were going great, but now we've had the writer strikes and all these things happen in the interim. Is there a rate a retaining fee rate, or is it?
Yes.
How does that work?
Again, case by case.
But we do have the roster rate is
roster.
what you're saying, that we work with you on that comes with a set. So our roster comes with a set of inclusion benefits that only are for our roster clients. Inclusion, we have a monthly production schedule that goes out each month with the projects you're in production on to over 800 media, and that's so we can help get those long lead print outlets and get your name out there and build that awareness with the media. So the roster does come with a certain set benefits, and it is a low retainer. And if you do have a project coming up, but it's been a hard year, with the COVID or strikes or whatever is happening, we do work with you and your budget. And that is very important to us.
And also, we are very understanding about your situation. If you want to pause for a couple of
Yes.
months, no problem at all.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not quite like a gym membership where you sign the contract and then you're
No, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Just
You got to cancel the credit card to get out of it.
No, that's personal experience, right?
oh God.
I think it's I just had a client who has been a roster client for many years, and is in a moment where is filming a lot. And so there's not a lot for me to promote right now. And normally he would stay on the roster because of the benefits. But because of the strikes and everything this year, we paused. But one of the great things about being on the roster and then pausing is that I was able, I now know exactly what is coming up for him. I kind of know a timeline for when it's going to come up. So now I can go to him when we're at a point where I have to be like, look, this is where I'd want to start on your campaign. So you can get, some of the print publications, you need to be pitching them many, many months in advance, because they're already planning magazines are probably planning their September issues by now. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm like,
stuff like that. So I now know exactly when to go to this client and be like, hey, since your project is coming out in October, we need to start pitching you now. Are you ready to come back on? And stuff like that. And so being on the roster and then maybe needing to pause can have its benefits, even if it means we're talking about money a little bit more, which can be a little bit awkward. It always is a little bit awkward.
But it's about transparency, right? If
Yeah.
you say, hey, or they did a show, but it gets pushed because of whatever the timing is. You guys can maybe sometimes help with that too.
And also because, I'm just going to
please
add on to what she just said about the media calendars. So we know what's, say, for an example, the Hollywood Reporter is going to be doing, the top 10 up and coming artisans, whatever, in November issue. We're always going to think about you. So we are not like, you're not paying, so we're not going to think about you. No, it's nothing like that. We're always going to have you in our minds and go like, hey, by the way, there's this opportunity, coming up. If you want to, look
be
at
included.
it.
This is the editorial deadline. This is the timeline we're kind of looking at. And we're just we're publicists, we're public relations specialists, we are communicators. We like to communicate.
I was going to say something, but no,
Sorry.
No,
We
it's
have
okay.
that with the guilds, Ann and I deal sometimes with doing articles. We know exactly when the shows are coming out and help with those articles to push sometimes if the publicist has reached out to us. Or like I said, Rachel talked to me about Rudy.
Exactly.
If you're on a project and you hire us for a project fee and then the project pushes, that doesn't change your project fee, right? That is your project fee. So let's say the project fee was $10 million you're going to pay us, and the project's going to come out in December.
I want to know your client list.
I was like, I'll either do something that's
Very
dramatically high or dramatically low. All right, we can do dramatically low. Let's say you're paying us $10 for this.
Realistic, 1,000.
You know what I mean? I know that.
And we say that this is the fee for the project. We get started on it, and then boop, they push it from fall to summer. That doesn't change your project fee. It changes the timelines. And there may be months where we don't have anything that we can do on your behalf because it's now coming out 6 months later than it originally was. But the project fee stays the same, and because it's more months doesn't mean that it's going to cost more money, because it is the same amount of work.
And if you already paid for it or paid a portion and then we find out it got pushed,
We will
girl math it. You paid for it early and now you're getting the service later.
I think, not that we are trying to sell EBComs, but I think, okay, so Meredith, the founder, and that culture has trickled down, okay? We pride ourselves in being human first. So, be kind and be human to our clients, and it's not all about the dollars and cents.
We also have a no assholes policy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's our
Oh my
main
gosh.
rule.
We unfortunately don't have that here because we have to take everybody, but we do try to keep our members at a level where I'm like, please stop doing that so you don't get in trouble. But yes, I wish that was possible. No names.
Oh.
I have a question. You said in the beginning that you'll do a Q&A
Yes.
with somebody, and then you'll kind of gauge to see if that person can be camera ready, or so what does that entail? Like, if you feel like, this person needs some help with interviewing, podcasts, do you do mock podcasts for them, or how do you
that's a great question. I don't think we've ever done a mock podcast, but so usually when we're walking through a Q&A with you, we get a report for what your response style is. So sometimes that if you're not camera ready, we definitely offer media training. So we have you sit down with one of our media trainers, and they kind of do, in that sense, they kind of do more like practice run stuff with you. How would you respond to this question? How do you respond to that question? If you ever wanted, say you wanted to do a mock podcast, I would love to do that. I would just like kind of set up the Q&A in a podcast format, and so you can hear and listen to yourself back and maybe take your own notes. So we would work with you on that. But in other sense, like sometimes we get clients that say like, hey, as many interviews as possible, can I give them as email Q&As? Because I'm much more comfortable writing than I am verbalizing. Sometimes we have the opposite. We have people who hate writing. They only want to talk on the phone. One important thing I want to mention, though, on the note of media training, there is rules in journalism. So if you are going on the record and speaking with a journalist, you don't automatically get to see the copy before it goes to print. Occasionally working with trade magazines or a costume designer, they will be courteous enough to let you have that preview just for technical accuracy corrections and stuff like that. But there is a lot of outlets that will say, no, you spoke on the record, you don't get to see it. And we just want people to be prepared for that when they are going into media, because there's oftentimes where some people will come to us and be like, can I see that before it goes out? And we can ask, we'll always ask for you, but a lot of times we do get a big fat no.
And to be clear, also, if a story is published with factual inaccuracies, journalists have a ethical responsibility to change the factual accuracy. So if you are misquoted, misrepresented, or they just make a mistake and they say, wrong
episode,
the wrong episode, we as soon as we're published, we're checking them, we're making sure everything's accurate, we're sending them corrections, they correct things fast.
The other thing that
I want to be clear. If you said something and they publish it and it is accurate, some journalists, depending on what they're writing for, who they're writing for, what they're doing, we can sometimes ask them to change or adjust. Sometimes they will say no. Sometimes they will say yes. It very much depends.
It's mostly no.
It's mostly no, but
She's
some
like trying not to be.
We have education classes of public speaking to teach our members to please be wary about what you say. Yes, that particular studio did XYZ, but let's just not say it. Like, you just have to be very careful because we don't want our members to ever be in a bad light, right? It's always positive, and that's why sometimes there's no juicy story because they can't say it, right?
See, that's where we all, like, as publicists, we are sitting in those interviews.
Yeah, we sit in on the interviews with you.
We're going to listen what you say, and immediately maybe or day after you go like, you know what, yesterday I said this. Can you go and talk to the journalist? I'm not very comfortable about what I just said.
And sometimes they will. Like, I had a client say a budget of a project to a journalist, and then
not supposed to.
And then afterwards, I stayed on and I said, "Do you mind not publishing that?" And the journalist, because that was not a focus of their story and it wasn't important, was happy not to publish it. Now, a different journalist may have said, I'm sorry, they said it on the record, I'm going to use it, and then I would just be like, that's fine, but then we go and we work with let the studio know so they're not surprised, and we can work with situations like that.
Rule of thumb, don't talk about budget.
I think we're more concerned about bad mouthing, but also leaks that accidentally spoilers.
Also journalists will journalists also have to work with the studios. So sometimes if you say something before it is supposed to be out there,
or before they've even written the story, is the best time to get them, because then they just
because then I can say, hey, the studio doesn't want this to be published until after something goes up, and we use the studios as like a big bad, as like a scare tactic, because the studio can deny the publication to speak to like the director and the actors and stuff, and so we're like, you can use it, but can you please not use it until after X date, and that happens sometimes too. So it really depends. But this is the thing that we can do during media training also, is like if a journalist asks you a question like, what's the budget? We train you on how to
pivot
and sometimes it's like humor. Sometimes it's like, I can't answer that. And sometimes it's like, well, the budget for this project definitely allowed me to do this with my costumes, right? Stuff like that. So
And just to let you guys know that there are a lot of naughty media people out there, right?
Yeah.
No,
No, like, you know, like
Oh,
especially,
always.
no, especially like for like big things, like for Marvel or DC things. Oh,
Oh,
my God,
yes,
they go
absolutely.
Very
crazy.
naughty
So every
about
little
Marvel.
crumb that you say will be like, oh my God, that's a hint.
I
that's a
always
spoiler.
Yes,
I
that's what I'm
always
saying.
tell my clients to, like, sometimes I've had stories from my client, like, that go up for my clients that are like, you'll never expect what happened during the, like, unedited cut of this thing.
Yeah.
And then it was like, the actor was funny. But, like, the headline is, like,
It's like the clickbait,
a
right?
shocking thing, yeah.
Or
I had a-
season renewals.
Yeah.
We get a lot of
Oh
those
my God.
headlines.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I had a client who was an editor who gave a speech that some people on TikTok thought was like a response to a speech Harry Styles gave, and was like clapping back at Harry Styles. So there were like all these like articles about it, and they were like, editor Paul Rogers claps back to Harry Styles, and I had to go to all these journalists and say, he was not aware of Harry Styles' speech. This was not a clapback. And so then they had to change their headlines, but they changed their headlines to TikTokers think that editor Paul Rogers is clapping back to Harry Styles, because that was factually accurate.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
Difficult day.
like a subtle probing question, because this just happened recently, so it's on the top of my mind, is a journalist from an outlet that is now on our blacklist.
I haven't heard about
Yes,
this. I
because
can't wait till we
if
get off
you-
camera.
Yeah, because if you are purposely asking probing questions that you know you're not supposed to ask, because all the journalists know, then we're most likely going to advise our clients stay away from working with you or interviewing with your outlet, because you're kind of trying to get them in trouble a little bit, and we want you in the safest situation.
Or they don't
possible.
care if you get in trouble.
Or they- yeah, they don't
very
care.
short-sighted. Very short-sighted.
But they had asked the question, like, what do you think? Do you think the season's going to be renewed? And the client said, I hope so. I think it's a great show. They turned that into
misquote you.
the misquote, but also the clickbait headlines that they'll do is, like, what did the headline say? It's
Costume designer confirms
like, costume
they
designer
think the show will come
yeah,
back.
or it'll be like costume designer doesn't seem hopeful of a season 2 renewal, like, and like it's just like
Costume designer refuses to confirm
Yeah,
season
like-
2 renewal.
they'll just spin it. They'll spin it.
That's fun.
Yeah, but if we have the opportunity, we do sit in on interviews. Technically, there's this unwritten rule that we're not supposed to interrupt. But if someone ever asked you guys a question that were truly like, whoa, we would actually chime in on the line and be
we
like,
have done that.
Yeah,
we're gonna skip
yeah.
that
We
question.
have
We'll
so
jump in,
done
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, this is like quick for your media training. If you're ever with a journalist that asks you something that you like don't want to answer, you can always say, you know, that's such a great question. I actually have to take a look at my notes or think about that a little bit, and I'll get back to you.
Can I
Yeah.
follow up with you after?
I'll follow up with you after.
Or I can
Yeah.
email you on that.
Yeah.
And then you can ask somebody, am I allowed to say that we did a white dress in the finale? And then they're like, yeah, that's fine to say. And then you email them after.
Smart. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Go ahead.
So when you do the media stuff, if like you have a client and they
Mhm.
have an interview coming up or a podcast, do you normally try to get them questions ahead of time
Absolutely.
so they can prepare?
We try our best to get questions in advance. Not everybody likes to provide questions in advance, so we do need you to be aware of it. Also too, if you're doing a press run, you'll notice you get a lot of the same questions over and over again. So sometimes we try and like think of the questions that they'll ask in advance for you, but if we're not provided questions in advance or they're not able, podcasts are actually usually pretty good about it, or they'll give you general talking points or hit points that they want to do. Journalists sometimes are kind of like, no, we want to hear their authentic response to these questions. But then that's when we review talking points with you. We go through studio or producer talking points that have been provided, and or we then craft like your curated talking points on the stuff you want to highlight from your work.
Yeah, and we can do it all different ways based on, I think we talked about this a little bit, based on like your preferred style. So if you're somebody that like needs to talk out your thoughts, we can do it in a conversation. If you're somebody that wants to write out your thoughts, you can write it out and we can review a written document together. We've all sat in on hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews at this point, so we can put together proposed questions. I think sometimes some journalists will say things like, we want their authentic answers, but what they're actually saying is, I am busy and I will not be writing up questions in advance.
Yes. Yes.
And so those are times when we can say, we don't know what the questions are going to be, but this is what we think they're going to ask, and we can review things.
And usually, like, ahead of time, we'll know, like, what the focus is of the article. Like, if they're wanting to talk about, like, a specific sequence or scene or a set costume or a set view or one character, we kind of just curate based on that.
But we do ask them, though, like, like in what's your story angle, right? Like, sometimes they're gonna feature, like, the other artisans as well. It's just not costume design. So they might even have someone else being interviewed with you.
Thank you, ladies, so much for coming today. Hopefully everybody got a
Thank you for
little
having
taste
us.
of it.
Yeah.